Where's Edwin?
He disappeared like about 5 minutes ago.
Okay. I called um I called David to call Edwin.
He just sent a message on Signal saying that he's sorry, but he didn't say anything else. So I'm not sure if he's having issues.
Hello, everyone. We're so glad you're with us. Please we're going to take a few more minutes to let others join in on the call. Tonight, we have guest speakers from both Venezuela and Havana, Cuba. And as you know, there is a blockade of the US government on Cuba that makes technology very difficult. They try to cut off exchanges like this one. And that is why we're using, instead of, normally we do a call like this on Zoom, we're using Google and we're having a little bit of a learning curve with it. So you might see a bunch of different images pop up. So we're asking you to make sure that your mics are off. Please turn off your cameras if you can. We do hope to be able to have some exchange and take some questions, which we'd like to do in the chat. Um, and but like I said, we're using Google tonight because that was what was available to our colleagues in Venezuela and Cuba. So we're having a little bit of a learning curve with it. We're just going to wait another minute or two, and then we'll get started. We're so glad you're here with us. So we have more people joining us. Um, my name is Christina Perez, and I am the moderator tonight. Good evening, everyone. We're so glad that you can join us for this really important conversation and teaching entitled Hands Off Venezuela, Hands Off Cuba. We are using tonight Google. And we don't know how to remove things. I see your question, James. We are using this format tonight because Zoom was unavailable to our colleagues in Cuba and Venezuela. U.S. sanctions and U.S. policy is aimed at keeping us separated, at making it difficult for us to communicate. And that's what's happening tonight. And so we really appreciate your patience as we try to learn this new format. Tonight's conversation is organized by the Hot House, especially by its founder and executive director, Marguerite Hoberg. On behalf of all of the sponsors, all of the organizations that were part of tonight's event, I want to thank you for being here and being part of this really important conversation. Tonight, we expect to be joined by two remarkable experts, one speaking to us from Caracas and the other from Havana. Can y'all hear me okay out there? So tonight they're going to help us unpack 4 essential questions. I see somebody raised a hand. We are asking people to turn off your cameras to make sure your volume is muted. But the first question that we're really going to look at is, how did we get here? What history, what politics explain the U.S.'s long, aggressive military and economic posture towards Cuba and Venezuela? Secondly, we want to understand a little bit more about the relationship between Cuba and Venezuela. How has it evolved? And why has it become such a focus of U.S. foreign policy? Third, we want to look at what is driving outward migration. And here we'll be looking directly at the role of U.S. economic sanctions and the role that they play in creating hardship, displacement, and instability. And finally, fourth, we're going to talk about what we can do as people living in the United States to stop war. At this moment, when the U.S. is moving dangerously close to military escalation in Venezuela, what can we do collectively, politically, and in our communities to oppose war and support peace? Now, before we begin our first question, I'd like to introduce our speakers for the evening. First, joining us from Caracas is Jesus Rodriguez Espinosa. Jesus is an expert in international relations, Venezuelan politics, and communication. He served for several years as the Consul General of Venezuela here in Chicago. He's also the founder and editor of the Orinoco Tribune, a leading Venezuelan anti-imperialist news outlet. We're honored to have him here with us. From Havana, we also have joining us Edwin Cristian Garcia Vivas, although Edwin is having some technical difficulties, and so we're hoping that he's going to be able to join us again in a moment. Edwin is a specialist at the North American Department of Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, otherwise known as ICAP. He's part of the academic research group on relations between Cuba and the United States, and he has written and conducted extensive research on the history and dynamics of U.S.-Cuban relations. We're really hoping he's going to be able to resolve the internet problems and get back on the call with us tonight. So we're so grateful to them both. So we're going to start with Jesus, with our first question. How did we get here? What historical and political forces explain the United States' long-standing military and economic hostility towards Cuba and Venezuela? Jesus.
Sorry. Do you hear me fine now? Thank you for the invitation, Compass. And I hope that the information that we provide today helps you understand a little bit better what happens in Cuba and Venezuela, especially in this current scenario where the U.S. is military threatening Venezuela in an unprecedented way. So basically, going to the first point that we wanted to develop, I have to say that we are here and the U.S. complaint against Venezuela. That is what I have to talk about. Is that we are a narco-terrorist entity, according to them, and that we are killing hundreds of thousands of U.S. nationals because allegedly, all of the sudden, we are the main source of drugs to the U.S. market. And everyone knows that that's a lie, but that's the argument. That's the U.S. complaint, basically. Other complaints that have been, re issue and reissue over the years, even since President Hugo Chavez was in power, is that at least right now that Maduro is an authoritarian, President Maduro, that there is no respect of human rights in Venezuela. That's what they say, which is a big lie. That we have that we are a Hamas and Hezbollah base. That's something that they also repeat regularly. That we interfere in U.S. and Latin American elections. That the 2024 elections in Venezuela were fraudulent. So those are like all the lies that has been repeated over decades already in the U.S. media about Venezuela, and of course that create this mixed sentiment in in the U.S. public opinion. Really, especially those that are not well informed, thinking that we in Venezuela are some sort of monsters that I don't know that do not deserve to be on Earth. So that's basically what have us here. And as I already said, those things are big lies. But the important thing is that the U.S. Gets what it wants, and the U.S. just wants to control the hemisphere. A few months ago, when President Trump took office and he began to talk about Greenland and annexing Canada and controlling back the Panama Canal and changing the Gulf of Mexico name and so on, I initially saw that he was crazy, like many of us. But in reality, right now, many experts have been claiming that this is a very comprehensive approach from U.S. Strategy, which is not designed by President Trump, by the way, which is something decided by the U.S. oligarchs that are the ones that really control the U.S. and is basically designed to control the region because of the scenario. The international scenario has been changing, and the U.S. has not the same strength that it has 10 or 20 years ago because of the ascension of new powers like Russia, like India, like China, and and for that reason, U.S. strategies has been claiming and requesting that the U.S. regain control of its area. And it is a fact that the U.S. have been losing control of this part of the world, especially if you take it into the economic trade issues. I mean, right now, the only countries in Latin America that has the U.S. as the main trading partner are Mexico and Colombia. So that mean because China have take that leadership in recent years. So it is a fact that the U.S. is losing control of the region, and of course they want to regain control of the area because of that international geopolitical scenario, and at the same time, that control is somehow intertwined with the need of natural resources. Venezuela happened to be over the biggest oil reserve on earth. So that's one of the other important reasons in reality behind what is happening right now. And the third level that I associate to this, situation is that Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua are bad examples between quotations for the U.S. And for that reason, for ideological issues, it's extremely important for the U.S. to get rid of countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Venezuela because we represent countries that basically do not submit to U.S. dictates. That we are not against the U.S. neither, but we are not willing to accept orders from the U.S. That's our most important fault, if you want to call it like that. So that's basically what I want to say. I don't want to take more time from the compa from Cuba. I'm not sure if we managed to have him back.
Thank you so much, Jesus. No, Edwin has not been able to rejoin us yet. For everybody who is with us tonight, we're having a very hard time connecting with our colleague in Cuba, and that is the purpose of U.S. foreign policy, to keep us separated, to interfere with basic communication and knowledge sharing like we're doing here tonight. Jesus, as you were speaking, I just wanted to kind of, so you were saying that you saw like the three kind of main reasons that the U.S. was using to justify this policy. Was one, to control the whole hemisphere, two, to go after Cuba or to Venezuela's oil reserves, and three, the threat of a bad example that both Venezuela and Cuba have been all these years. About 20 years ago, I was in the state of Anzoátegui, and I was able to see these oil reserves, which have been returned on traditional land back to the native people of Venezuela. Is that not the case?
Venezuela has been implemented policies to somehow recognize the rights of indigenous people. I believe that we need to do more, but I believe that we are at the vanguard of countries that have recognized rights of indigenous peoples, their right to their land, their right to their respect to their traditions and cultures, to their languages, and to their political ways of organizations. For example, elections in Venezuela are held, regional elections are held in a different manner and in different dates than regular elections, because they are organized not based on the criollo ways, as someone might say, but based on the traditions of the indigenous people and the way they historically has choose their leaders. So that's one way to say that. And there are too many examples. Of course, in the middle of the economic crisis that we have been living in recent years, and this latest U.S. military aggression, we have been not able to achieve many of the things that we wanted to achieve, and many achievements that we reached during President Chavez's time has been reverted because of what I say, because of the economic crisis, and with the economic crisis, one have to talk about the U.S. sanctions and the blockade, and now this craziness that has been happening this year with these deportations of Venezuela and treating them like criminals, and the latest military craziness that have right now like around 50,000 U.S. troops in front of Venezuela. So That would be my answer.
Thank you so much. We are still waiting for our colleague from Cuba. Many of you remember when Obama was president, the moves that he made to renormalize the relationship between the United States and Cuba. All of that was undone during President Trump's first term. And most cruelly, after January 6th, but before he left office in 2020, in the middle of the worst of the pandemic, President Trump imposed horrific sanctions upon Cuba that made it very hard for them to survive and resist and thrive after COVID-19. And today, it continues. And one of the reasons the attacks have happened on Venezuela is because Venezuela has been one of the countries that's continued to stand by Cuba, support Cuba, help them with oil, which they don't so desperately need to generate electricity. And it's one of the reasons why it's very hard to communicate tonight with our colleague in Cuba. What we're going to do is hopefully we'll have Edwin back on soon, but I wanted to repost the second question, which is what we're going to be moving into. So we're going to go back to you, Jesus. But we want to understand a little bit more this relationship between Cuba and Venezuela. How has it evolved and why has it become such a focus for U.S. policy?
Yes, going back to what you just said about that Venezuela stand with Cuba, one have the biggest reference, the biggest framework of our relationship over the last 2 decades, more than 2 decades, is the Cuba-Venezuela Comprehensive Agreement. That's the name of that agreement. And that agreement was signed in 2000, I believe, a few months after President Chavez took office. I was working for the Ministry of Science and Technology then. And I remember that almost half of the executive branch traveled to Cuba and sit for several weeks with their Cuban counterparts to design this agreement. And this agreement has been amazing in terms of the benefits, not only for Cuba, but also for Venezuela. Venezuela received an important push from Cuba in a very delicate moment in 2002 and 2003 with the launching of Mission Robinson, which is the one that we launched with the help of Cubans to eradicate illiteracy based on the Yo Si Puedo Cuban method. Of eradicating illiteracy. So that was extremely helpful, especially because in 2002 is when this coup d'etat against Hugo Chavez happened. And the situation in the country was very tense and delicate, the balance of power. So with the launching of Mission Robinson and the launching of Mission Barrio Adentro, which was another extremely significant program that we call Misiones here in Venezuela, that other program basically give access to millions of Venezuelans that did not access before to healthcare for free all over the country. And that helped stabilize President Chavez, political situation at that time, and help Chavismo and the Bolivarian Revolution to continue and develop over the years. And what we are doing right now with Cuba, sending oil, is somehow part of that comprehensive agreement. It's cooperation, it's solidarity, but we exchange things also, And we have not been able to deliver all the oil that we want to deliver. And Cuba also has been extremely affected, especially in recent years after President Trump put them back in the list of terrorist organization, states sponsor of terrorism, and because they wanted to, they were helping to hold peace negotiations for Colombia. And that was the excuse used by President Trump in his first term to put Cuba back into the list of state sponsor of terrorism, which is an atrocity because Cuba is among the countries that should be farthest from that list on earth. I mean, so what I'm trying to tell you is that Cuba has been affected extremely by that measure taken by President Trump that has complicated even more the economic situation in Cuba, and that have driven to these terrible, episodes of blackouts that they have been living in recent months. And we try to help with the oil that we have, but we are also struggling, because of the U.S. sanctions that are not an easy thing neither, and because of the comprehensive aggression not only by the U.S. but the U.S. allies over the world. So we have been resisting. Cuban has been resisting for a longer time, and these situations that we have been living has helped us to make this brotherhood better. If you ask me, that's the way I see it. I am on many Venezuelans and many Chavistas that see Cubans as brothers. And what I say, this Venezuela-Cuba Comprehensive Agreement signed in 2000 is the more clear example of that brotherhood that we have. So we know that Cuba will be sorry, that Cuba will be always there to support the Bolivarian Revolution, and that the majority of Venezuelans will be there to help Cuba, surpass the situation that they are currently living. So we are very optimistic anyway, because right now, as I said at the beginning, the U.S. is not the only power around, and that's one of the good things that we can see in the world geopolitical situation, because you have other important actors in international geopolitical scene, like I say, like Russia, like China, like India, like South Africa, like Turkey, like many other countries that right now can help. And actually, in the case of Venezuela, I'm pretty sure that in the case of Cuba, are helping us to bypass the U.S. blockade and U.S. sanctions. And for that reason, we have been in Venezuela, especially since 2020, recording and reporting economic growth despite the incredible U.S. sanctions that we have been living. So that's an important thing that one to have to take into account when analyzing the relationship between Cuba and Venezuela, and contextualizing it within these U.S. imperialist attacks and blockades against our countries.
Thank you so much. So what I heard you talking about was that the basis of the deep relationship with Cuba and Venezuela goes back to over 25 years ago, when Hugo Chavez was president. And what he did was he helped start really deep social programs that they called missions. There were health programs, education programs, economic programs, and that Cuba was a deep partner in both the health and the education programs.
In almost all the programs. I forgot to mention many others,
but some
those
of
are the
you
most
might
important.
know that that Cuba had one of very high literacy rate in the Americas when the revolution happened, and one of the very first things that they did was create a national volunteer program to wipe out illiteracy and teach everybody basic reading and writing. And then they continued with the help of UNESCO and the UN to develop reading programs that were then implemented throughout Latin America. And this was the basis of some of the educational programs that the missions were able to put into place in Venezuela. And also you mentioned Barrio Adentro, which was the preventative and community-based health programs that Cuba worked with Venezuela to develop. And I remember very clearly one of the biggest things they did was help have eye surgeries for people who had lost their vision due to preventable and reversible conditions. And imagine, how can people transform their lives? How can people, develop, participate in community and economic programs when they're limited, and so by preventable disease? And so it was education and health that was the basis of this relationship that has drawn the ire of the United States. And the other thing you really mentioned was that the cooperation that Venezuela has offered in terms of being able to assist with petroleum, as the United States has worked to cut off all avenues, commercial avenues to Cuba, that this very beautiful relationship of solidarity that has cost Venezuela a lot, and that the U.S. has blocked those tankers as they have tried to get into Cuba to bring the oil that is needed to turn the turbines to be able to make the electricity so that people can have, put food away in their fridges and have a fan or a radio, which is so important to just being able to live and to be able to have a life with dignity. This is what the United States is trying to stop. So we're going to go into the third question, which I think you can really kind of gets to the heart of the economic sanctions and the punishment that the United States has put on Venezuela and what this has meant for the people of Venezuela. And we know, because I'm in Chicago, just outside of Chicago, and we know that many Venezuelans who entered the country legally with asylum were then shipped from Texas into Chicago. And we remember that we welcomed 2 years ago people who arrived in our city cold in the winter. We helped organize in our city to get coats and find places for people to live. And then we have watched the brutality of the state violence in the Operation Midway Blitz that was launched against our Latin American brothers and sisters and non-binary folks in our city. And so let's get a little bit into understanding a little bit more of how and the sanctions.
Yes, I just want to let all the compas that are listening to us know that Edwin, the speaker from Cuba, is having technical problems. He has been communicating with us via chat, letting us know that he might join soon, but he's saying that they are having technical issues there. And also tell you, compas, that you can write your questions. We're going to have a question and answer session, and you can write your questions in the chat section. And also invite you, if you can, to mute your audio and your video, because I believe that for that reason the video live stream might be better, I think. And I'm right, Christina? Did I say it right? Okay. I going back to the question. It is extremely important to say that all this wave of Venezuelan migrants that we have been seeing in recent years, especially right now, especially in the US, but it was massive towards South America initially. But also to the US. Since 2012, 2013, the US launched this aggressive campaign, diplomatic tirade against Venezuela. And President Maduro was not even there because President Chavez died in 2013. But they launched this campaign, a very comprehensive campaign, inviting Venezuelans to migrate to other countries because of the humanitarian crisis that they began to sail during those years. In 2013, 2014, the prices of oil went down and President Chavez died, and that created this sort of vacuum of decision making in Venezuela. And I put the blame, part of the small part of the blame of the economic situation that we face, especially during 2013 and 2014, on that. Then we keep moving with the inertia of President Maduro trying to respect the economic decisions and the decisions taken by President Chavez, and not changing a few things that needed to be changed. And somehow, if you ask me, that's aggravated the economic crisis that we were living. And in addition to that, and this is the most important chunk of the economic crisis that we faced during those years, in 2015 and 2016, the US began to systematically launch these sanction blockade operations against Venezuela. You have to remember that in 2015, President Obama signed this executive decree naming Venezuela as an extraordinary threat to the U.S. security. So that was the ignition of a systematic, comprehensive sanction and blockade campaign against Venezuela that worsened, like to incredible levels, the economic situation that we were living, and that pushed a mass of Venezuelans abroad. Also because within those years, the Lima Group was created. This diplomatic campaign and propaganda campaign saying that we were in a humanitarian crisis because they wanted to use that excuse to launch a military intervention in Venezuela using the OAS. Some of you might not remember that, but that happened and was very strong, especially between 2012 and 2016 or 17. And those countries, led by the US and Canada, many Latin American far-right governments joined that initiative, and they explicitly invited Venezuelans to migrate. It's extremely important to say that. And they gave Venezuelans facilities to migrate. I remember that in the US during those years, many compas, Latinos in the US were like, why are you giving these facilities to the Venezuelans, and the Hondurans and the Salvadorians are having too many trouble to migrate to the US? I mean, those things happen, and those things happen because that was part of a design. That was a policy, especially designed to facilitate the migration of Venezuelans, because that gave the US and the far-right oligarchies of the region an excuse to say properly that there was a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, and that for that reason they need to launch a humanitarian invasion of the country. That was part of the, of the construction. And with the sanctions, that massive migration that initially went to Latin America, as I was saying at the beginning, began after a few years. It grows a lot, but after a few years, it somehow collapsed because xenophobia and exploitation of the Venezuelan migrants in South America began to affect them. During those years, those migrants that moved to South America decided to move north. And that's when, especially that happened during the 2017 and between 2007 and 2020, with this whole by Darien Gap, situation. People crossing from Colombia to Panama via the Darien, and all this, massive, mainstream media campaigns denouncing the problem and everything. But that was part of the whole situation. What I'm trying to tell you is that it's important, Compass, that you mute your audio, because that affects the transmission. What I was saying that somehow created the conditions for this crisis, and what happened in South America a few years ago with this xenophobia and this exploitation of Venezuelans and began to happen in the Humberto, Janet, and Jim began to happen in recent years in the U.S. against Venezuelans. I mean, this xenophobia, what you were saying about these Venezuelans a few years ago being received by the U.S. authorities, but now being treated like criminals despite them following the legal channels to become legal residents or U.S. nationals. They have been deported even though they have followed all the steps. They are not illegal. What I'm trying to say, illegal between quotations, they are not undocumented migrants. There has been Venezuelans that have migrated to the U.S. They I don't know the word in English for that, but they se entregan a las autoridades estadounidenses. They present themselves in front of the U.S. migration authorities at the border, and they request immediately asylum. That's basically the process that the majority of these Venezuelans that have been arriving in recent years to the U.S. follow. And then a legal migration procedures began, and the majority of those Venezuelans that has been being deported in recent months has been following that procedure, and they have been deported anyway. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it's a terrible situation, and the worst part is that the right-wingers in Venezuela that push those migrants somehow with the help of the right-wing governments of the U.S. and Latin America to move abroad. Right now, they are applauding President Trump for sending those migrants back to Venezuela or to concentration camps in El Salvador, as it happens a few months ago, and doing the crazy things that the U.S. is doing against these migrants. I understand that the U.S. has the complete right to deal with the migration issue, but what is happening right now is like a demonization of the Venezuelan migrants to a level that is worrisome, because they are saying that we are mental health patients, that we are criminals, that we are part of the narco-terrorist organizations and things like that. So I hope that explains a little bit it's a very complex issue that you cannot, explain comprehensively.
No, I think you've been
time.
very clear. You've been very clear in explaining that the United States created economic chaos in Venezuela through the sanctions, then basically encouraged outward legal migration to the United States. And then these legal immigrants were then turned into criminals, or they were hunted down in the street in my neighborhood here on the west side of Chicago. Unfortunately, because of this blockade, we are not able to get Edwin back to us from Havana, but we are very grateful that David Ramirez from the Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C. is able to join us. I have noticed in the chat that people have quite a few questions, so we want to get back to Jesus in a minute, but David, can you unmute yourself and join the conversation? We're so glad that you were able to join us. We're so sorry Edwin can't be here.
Yes, thank you so much for having us here. I want to carry the message from Edwin and the colleagues and friends from ECAP. They are explaining that they are currently, as we speak, experiencing an issue with a blackout in Havana. And they are in the headquarters of ECAP preparing to participate in this event because they wanted to make sure everything went according to plan. But unfortunately, the solar power generator that they had as a backup actually, unfortunately, ran out of power. So there is zero possibility to have access to internet right now. in that specific location. They are trying to still see if they can connect through their data transfer from their phones, but unfortunately it's very difficult. So I want to carry a message of solidarity, friendship, and appreciation for this event that you are carrying out, which is wonderful. We are very happy with the turnout, with the number of friends that are participating right now in this event, and basically to carry the message of our people, the people of Cuba, that are endlessly grateful for the eternal solidarity of the people of the United States that has for so many years and in the past few years pushed for so many resolutions against the blockade, against the terrorist list designation, and are currently pushing back against a probable, unfortunate possibility of an intervention in our region, in our hemisphere. Obviously, we don't have to say the solidarity between the people of Cuba and Venezuela. I mean, we are one of two peoples, and we are there for the Venezuelan people. The Venezuelan people is there for us. And when it comes to imperialism, we are very clear that the goals are the same. Maybe one day it's Gaza, the next day is Venezuela, the next day is Cuba. Unfortunately, it's up to us to carry the torch of social justice and to fight against imperialism. And right now, imperialism is at its worst. Um, we are here to carry out the message of the people of Cuba that are going through the effects of the Melissa hurricane, which has been horrible, horrendous in the eastern region of our country. We are still suffering from the impacts and destruction of the floods that came after Melissa. Um, we are still appreciating very much the help that is being brought from our comrades from Canada, from the United States, from the UN, from UN, from UNESCO, from UNICEF, from European countries, from Asia, even from Africa. We are receiving help and solidarity and expressions of friendship from these people. Um, we want to also, transmit the message that right now we are going through a difficult situation with specifically mattresses. Actually, we are, helping the people that we evacuated in the eastern part of Cuba. But unfortunately, because of the floods, many of them have lost mattresses. Most of them, many of them have lost completely their homes. But right now we're, talking about the possibility of getting some help regarding mattresses or the materials needed to produce the mattresses. This is something that is actually a big issue. I don't know, Christina. I wanted to say, Christina and Margaret, thank you so much for creating this beautiful event. And we are open. I'm here to answer any question that you might have. So here I am. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you stepping in. And again, thanks to the Hot House and Marguerite for organizing tonight's teach-in. Jesus, I wanted to turn back to you. There were a couple of questions in the chat that had to do with how are the people of your country, how are the folks of Venezuela, how are people doing right now under these very intense and terrifying military aggression and activities that the U.S. is engaging in just off of the coast? How are people doing? How are people preparing? And what do you think comes next?
We are worried. It's absolutely normal. In these circumstances, I believe that the majority of Venezuelans inside Venezuela and abroad, and people that have friends in Venezuela are worried about what might happen. But that doesn't mean that we are paralyzed. It's extremely important to say that, and it's extremely important. And it is extremely important to say that the government and the military and the Bolivarian militia has been asking us not to paralyze, to be aware of the threat, but not to paralyze ourselves or paralyze the country, because that's part of what this whole U.S. move is about. So we are not paralyzed. Actually, we in Orinoco Tribune try from time to time to show videos, and especially on X videos, and especially videos about things happening in the streets of Venezuela recently, to show that everything is evolving as it usually goes. But of course, there is some constraint. I'm pretty sure that, I mean, the expectation of the government for economic growth this year was about 10%. I'm pretty sure that this situation will impact a little bit the economic forecast for 2025. But if you ask me, I believe that maybe we will end up in 8 or 9% of economic growth this year, which is amazing, taking into consideration what we have been living through the whole year, because these things began in, I believe that in May, when if you ask me, when Trump sent these 252 Venezuelans to El Salvador. So this is how we see it. That's the easiest way to respond to your question. Going a little bit more into depth, I have to say that immediately after the U.S. began to show that its military aggression attempts, uh, President Maduro asked Venezuelans to sign up and to voluntarily enlist to the Bolivarian militia. The Bolivarian militia are not colectivos, or are not Bolivarian circles, or are not people in the street that receive machine guns like you read in mainstream media in the US. Colectivo, I mean, the Bolivarian militia is a branch of the Venezuelan army. That's something that was designed by President Chavez, and that has been strengthened by President Maduro in recent years. And right now, before the launching of this call, the numbers of people enlisted in the Bolivarian militia were around 4.5 million. And that has been always a deterrent for U.S. military full invasion or aggression against Venezuela. But after the call made by Maduro, the number of enlisted, actually Maduro talked yesterday about that, grew to 6.3 million Venezuelans. So in just a few weeks after Maduro calls for an enlistment, the number of Venezuelans in the militia grew almost by 2 million. So that gives you an idea on how Venezuelans react to foreign aggressions, to attempts of invasions and threats. So basically, what the U.S. is doing indirectly is strengthening President Maduro's positions, because even right-wing forces in Venezuela has been rejecting what the U.S. has been doing in recent months. Clearly, anti-Chavista politicians has been, I'm not saying that they are joining Chavismo. They are still very anti-Chavistas. That they are still very far right people, but they has been openly and publicly supporting the position of Venezuela of dignity, of defending our sovereignty, and the national sentiment of the willingness of defend our country no matter what. So I don't want to put the situation in terrible terms. I believe that a full military invasion of Venezuela is not something that might happen, at least under the current, scenario, under the current level of deployment of the U.S. But at this level of deployment, it's going to be extremely negative for President Trump to reverse what he has done. You know what I mean? He's not going to send those ships back to their bases without at least launching a few airstrikes against Venezuela. And that's the thing that I'm pretty sure is going to happen. I'm pretty sure that the U.S. in recent days or weeks are going to launch. One of the good things against that scenario is this whole awareness that has been growing in recent days against this U.S. Southern Command killing spree in the Caribbean. These things with headset now being directly pointed as a war criminal. I mean, those things play in favor of uh, a non-military scenario in Venezuela, but I still believe at this point that it's extremely possible that the U.S. will launch some sort of military strike just to justify all this mess that they have created. And after that, President Trump will say that he killed all the capos of the narco traffic in Venezuela, and the mission was accomplished, and that he is a peacemaker, and that he is the best guy in the world. That was gonna be his excuse for trying to revert all this mess that he have been creating in recent months.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that. I would like to ask you kind of a three-part question. One is, you referred to the illegal bombings that the United States has attacked ships off the coast. Can you tell us anything? Do you know anything more about that situation? And have any of the oil tankers going to Cuba been affected by that? And then the third part is, if such aerial bombings that you think are come, what will the reaction be of other South American countries like Colombia and Brazil?
What was the first part that
The first part has to do with these illegal bombings that the U.S. has been doing in the
Yes. I mean, basically, all humanity is in dark, about what the U.S. is doing, because there's no information. They are not providing anything, despite blurred videos, extremely blurred videos, not saying the names of the people that they has been killing, don't saying the exact location where those things has been happening, don't saying what kind of drug, if they actually had drug they were carrying. I mean, the whole world is in darkness, and this is a terrible precedent, if you ask me, for lawlessness in international law, or whatever you want to see it. I mean, basically, the information that is available is that they have killed at least 82, according to we have accounting in Orinoco Tribune about these killings, taking, recording everything that the headsec or Trump or the U.S. Other Command published on X, and the updated figure is 82 people assassinated in 21 strike on 22 small boats in the Caribbean and in the Eastern Pacific. That's the number. The nationalities are unknown. I suppose that the majority might be Venezuelans, but who knows? I mean, because reported info. I mean, there is reported information about Trinidadian people being killed, people from Trinidad and Tobago, people from Colombia. Even one survivor of those attacks was an Ecuadorian. So we don't know exactly who these people are. Actually, Venezuela yesterday announced, the National Assembly announced that they are going to launch an investigation, a parliamentary investigation to really report on the issues, because they actually also say that the families and relatives of people that has been killed in Sucre state in the east of Venezuela near Trinidad and Tobago are scared of report the incident because they have been threatened. We don't know by whom, but they have been threatened not to report and not to talk about the issue. Maybe they have been threatened by the mafia, but it is also possible. There's also a possibility that they have been threatened by the U.S. Who knows? I mean, mafias are mafias, and you don't know which mafia is the worst. So that's basically what has been happening. I mean, and that's all the information we have. The only fact also additional is that those are extrajudicial killings. And this thing that has been happening in recent hours around headset in the US is good, but it's also terrible because they are putting the finger on the execution of survivors, the double strike on this boat on September the 2nd. That was off the coast of Venezuela near Trinidad, actually. But the fact is that not the double strike is not the only bad thing that has been happening. All these strikes are illegal, and United Nations has been labeling as extrajudicial killings, and there should be consequences for any military officer that follow instructions to launch attack like that. Actually, a very good thing that has been happening is that since November 15, no more strike has been announced. And that somehow says that the US is right now worried, the Trump administration is worried about the legal repercussions of what they are doing, because I have the impression that they have decided to stop these strikes. Maybe I'm optimistic, but who knows? Maybe right now I had to tweet something about it. But anyway, I just wanted to mention those things.
To your knowledge, has the military, the U.S. military ships and off the coast stopped the transport of petroleum from Venezuela to Cuba?
Yes, that was the other. I mean, in recent, there are a lot of speculation in social media platforms and in even mainstream media about what happened and what Maduro talked with Trump and what Trump talked with Maduro, and these ships being blocked. For example, a few days ago, there was this allegedly this Russian ship being blocked that was coming to Venezuela with diluents for the petrochemical industry. But at the end of the day, that ship landed, docked in Venezuela. I haven't heard about shipments, Venezuelan oil shipments being blocked by the US. I haven't heard that, but that's a possibility, of course. The other part of the question that I forgot is that the one about what is going to happen if a full invasion of Venezuela happens. If a full invasion of Venezuela happens, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of Chavista friends, leftists, socialists, people supportive of the Bolivarian Revolution all over the region that are going to join us. And we are ready to fight to defend our country. In that not very desirable and possible scenario. And actually, presidents like Colombia's Petro or even Brazil Lula has been rejecting and questioning what has been happening around Venezuela and around these killings. So the situation in the region is going to be a mess. And the worst part is that the migration crisis that something like that might create is going to be like 2 or 3 times worse than what you have seen already. So if you think, some people in the US believe that the migration crisis is going to stop because the US launched a few strike or launch a full invasion against Venezuela, is very wrong. What is going to happen is the contrary. There's going to be a massive, migration crisis if something like that happens. So that's basically the situation in the region, and there's a lot of tension in the region. A lot of countries, officially governments are opposing that, but also there are a lot of friends of Venezuela all over the region that has been saying that they are willing to come here and defend the country in the case of an aggression. In the case of an strike, airstrike, and things like that, that I believe is a very possible scenario. I'm not sure how, because those strikes are launched from, warships that are very far away from the countries. When those things happen, the US try to protect their fleet to avoid being, subject to attacks. But I'm pretty sure that Venezuela is going to respond, even in that case, with battery, air defenses and things like that, to try to avoid, the killing of people or the damaging of Venezuelan infrastructure. They are trying to get rid of President Maduro. That's basically what is happening. And they're gonna, if you ask me, one of the objectives of an attack like that might be the Miraflores Palace or the place where President Maduro is, living or holding, the day-to-day activities. But the reality in Venezuela is that not even President Maduro is afraid or showing signs of being afraid of the U.S. Threats. You hear every day in social media that President Maduro is living in a bunker, that this minister and the other minister flee to Cuba or to Nicaragua or to China or to Russia, and those are lies. You see almost every day in Venezuelan TV the majority of the top officials doing their day-to-day activities in public places with a lot of people. And actually, yesterday was this amazing demonstration of support of President Maduro in front of Miraflores Palace, and that was amazing to see that amount of people there not being afraid of being possible targets of a U.S. strike, which is a real possibility. I'm trying to cover all the things that I forgot to tell you before.
No, you're doing a fantastic job. One of the questions I think has a little bit more to do for on our side here in the US, which is how do we talk to people about what's happening in Venezuela? And I think the title to tonight's program is just really, really perfect. Hands off Cuba, hands off Venezuela. That the Venezuelans and the Cubans have the right to self-determination and to sovereignty. We do not want war. We want to act for peace. And this is the moment when we can have the most effect. And we've seen our lawmakers in the United States raising questions, telling soldiers and people in the armed forces not to obey illegal orders. And it's also time for them to hear from us. Everything that we can do to reach out to the lawmakers and to people who make decisions and to very strongly say no to U.S. aggression and U.S. intervention in Venezuela, in the Caribbean, in Cuba, in all of Latin America. And I don't know, Marguerite, if you had a list of other activities. We know that there have been really wonderful acts of solidarity throughout the fall, demonstrations, other teach-ins like this one. But this is really the moment. And it's so hard because, the violence being done in our communities, both in the United States and in Latin America by the US government is immense, and it's at multi-levels. And we also have to be able to respond at multiple levels. We have to be able to defend our communities, to defend our immigrants, to stand with one another against state violence here in our communities in the United States, and to also unite with our compas in Venezuela and Cuba. So Marguerite is asking if you could put any links to actions in the chat, or continue to share them on the tube stream at hothouse.global so that we can continue this conversation and help the impact of this conversation tonight continue. Please share the link of the Hot House YouTube page with others who weren't able to join us tonight so that they can continue to have this information. Jesus, I don't know if you wanted to have any parting words.
Yes, regarding that issue, I somehow have a few things to share. I really believe that there has been, as you said, nice initiative in recent weeks, recent days in the U.S. about the situation in Venezuela and in Cuba. But because of this military craziness, a lot of people have been putting more attention lately to Venezuela for obvious reasons. Not because what is happening in Cuba is neither an emergency. I mean, what I'm trying to say is what is happening in Cuba is also a very complex situation. But having a lot of U.S. warships in front of your coast is somehow more worrisome for many. For that reason, a lot of events has been happening. I believe that more has to be done. I believe that it's important to let the Compass know that this is not a Republican or Democrats thing. These attacks against Venezuela has been a bipartisan thing over the decades, and that somehow has been putting us in the bad eye for U.S. public opinion, and that somehow needs to be reverted because we are very extremely far away from what this whole propaganda against Venezuela uh, says about us. And for that reason, trying to multiply these initiatives like these webinars, these protest rallies, letters to Congress people, are extremely important, but also being more active, replying to mainstream media, BS, sorry for my policy, sorry, uh, replying to mainstream media, lies on social media also does an important job, I know that a lot of people is worried to be canceled, to be because that's also part of the, between quotations, U.S. freedom of expression democracy. And know that a lot of people, socialist-minded people in the U.S., worries and try not to write too much on social media or write too much public about their way of thinking because they might be subjected to cancel policies, to being censored, to being prosecuted, to be repressed by the state apparatus in the US. Those things happen, and one knows that those things happen. But I believe that in situations like this, people need to realize that the life of a lot of people here in Venezuela are going to be at stake, and more things needs to be done. And another important initiative is that I mentioned, that this solidarity militia brigades that has been organized in some countries in Latin America, especially, is something that I believe is important, and some people might organize themselves in the US to do something like that. Basically, in Uruguay and in Colombia, and I believe that also in Argentina, I've seen organizations, grassroots organizations, uh, sending videos and organizing campaigns in social media to say that they are willing to join the Bolivarian militia in the case of a U.S. aggression against Venezuela. And I believe that those initiatives, they might not become a reality. I hope that they would in the case of the worst scenario. But even those campaigns are extremely important, first because they raise the spirit of us here in Venezuela, but also because they send a signal to the right wingers about the willingness of the people all over the world to support and to defend Venezuela. So that's an important initiative. Another important initiative that I read recently for a compa in Canada is that people can try to do this boycott, divestment, sanctions thing that is being done against Israel, also against the US and those corporations more involved in what is happening against Venezuela. I think those are things that I'm just sharing with you to see if some compass in the US decide to pick them up and try to put more pressure on public opinion, but also on the establishment to change, the situation.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and to the Hot House and Marguerite for organizing this very important conversation. To sum up, Jesus started out by talking about some of the reasons that Venezuela is being targeted right now is because the United States is trying to take control of the hemisphere, and because of the oil reserves that Venezuela has. And I have a button that goes back to the 1990s, no blood for oil, and we're there again. And everybody needs to do everything they can, because as Jesus said, not only can this impact US policy, but it also builds solidarity, and it builds and it helps people in Venezuela and Cuba resist. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Please share this video on YouTube with others and continue to check in with Hot House. So the stream is on Hot House Global on YouTube, and please help spread the word. And thanks everybody tonight from Caracas to Havana to Chicago and beyond. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Un abrazo, compas. Nice to see you out there, the friends that I see out there. Nice to see you, compas. Un abrazo. Bye-bye, Cristina. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Jesus. We did it.
Wow,
Buenas
better on
noches.
this situation. Un abrazo. Bye-bye, Margarita, too.
Ciao, ciao.
Un abrazo, David. I see your message, by the way. I'm going to answer it right now. Bye-bye.